Hello, today I'm going to take you for a quick tour through my CIS 131 class. This is a class that I have offered online quite a few times. I'm quite seasoned in quality matters trainings. That's kind of the authority on best practices for online teaching and course development. So I'm just going to take you for a walk through my 131, which is the course that I generally use for those QM trainings. And so I've had a lot of people look at this and such. It's not QM reviewed, but I'm qualified to be a QM reviewer, so I kind of know how this should go. So anyways, I'm going to show you what it looks like. One of the criticisms, and I think I should just mention this immediately, is that of my courses is that there's kind of a lot of stuff in them. And I recognize that there's always a balance between putting too much stuff and not enough stuff, and there's no best way to organize it. You could debate all day long about how things should be organized. This is just how I organize things. Ultimately, I think you should pick what you think makes the most sense to you, because you're not going to be able to please everybody. So, you look at what my navigation bar looks like. Sorry, I already wasted a minute of talking. All right, so when you pop in, you're greeted by announcements. My thing that I want to share with you about this is there's a lot of ways to communicate with the students in an online class. One of them, the way I used to do it, is I would go down to view grades and like check everyone's name, send them an email there. You can also do like the DLX, like the email lists. I'm telling you, I think the best way to do it is through creating an announcement. If you create an announcement, it's like an email, right? There's your subject, there's your message, and then there's an option down here to send this announcement immediately. So that's how you can email your class. Now, the reason that's better than the other ways is that this is the history of the communications that I've had with my class, right? You can see them week 9, week 8, week 7, week 6, and so on the Monday of every week. I send them a little email saying, hey, here's what's due. Right, so right, you can see here there's 4 assignments and a lab and a little bit of a talk about what I'm hoping you do and what we're covering for the week. This is me trying to keep it concise. You see at some point we get into drop scores, course evaluations. All my communications are here. And so this is probably the best way to do it because you can see the archive of them right here, as opposed to wondering what the heck you sent to who, when. All right, so that's where you're greeted. One of the things that you would learn about if you were going to do a quality matters training, and I'm sure you even get it in a hot training, is start here. So you should think about what a student, the first time they enter your Blackboard shell, what they would want to see, and you want to clearly label that. It would be perfectly legitimate for me to have my first announcement be a bunch of stuff about start here. I mean, that could be my start here. And actually, these are in reverse chronological order. I do. In the first email that they get, first announcement that they get, there is some stuff about the attendance requirement. So over here in my navigation bar, see this first little set of stuff here? I make it its own thing because that's what you need to do to get started. So you go to start here, and I made a learning module out of this. I do not recommend that you do a learning module if you are new to this. Learning modules are pretty ambitious. This is very wordy. This definitely could be shorter. I kind of just wanted to try and make one because I thought it was... this has represented my best attempt at making the best class I can. And I haven't spared any resource of doing that, so I made one of these. It's a bunch of pages. Let me show you what it looks like from a student view. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm actually saying you probably shouldn't do this. But I want to show you what it looks like. I'll show you what a learning module is as opposed to just a bunch of resources stacked. So learning modules are kind of just like a bunch of pages, but you have to progress through them one at a time. Right, so this is just welcome. Here's me. Here's my office hours. This is saying, hey, go figure out that syllabus and schedule. You see, this could be very much condensed, but this is just what I did. This is just kind of a spiel about, hey, this is an online course. Make sure you set some time aside for it. What's due, right? Because that's the biggest question you get is what's due? How do I figure out what's due? So here's kind of how you're supposed to look at things, and here's what's due for the first week. Then we get into resources. Here's how you get Office, and here's a link to a video of me telling you how to do it. Here is where the data files are for your book. So you see, by breaking it down one little thing at a time, like these learning modules do, I think you're kind of... This is my best attempt at making people not gloss over anything. I mean, when it looks like this, you should be able to do it. Sure, people don't always, but it's my best attempt. And here's how you get going with SAM, which is the course software we use. It's pretty complicated to get signed up for. People struggle with it, so I made a video of it. And there's these text instructions, and then the recap is, hey, here's what you just learned about. Right, right? I know it's a learning module. I don't really know how to get out of here, so I'll just exit this. I just want to show you what that looks like from a student view. And I also want to be clear with you that I didn't need to make a learning module out of that. I could have just made it a bunch of resources like this. What do I get out of doing that? I don't know. It's probably a waste of my time, but if in a world where I don't have unlimited time, it's probably a waste of my time, but that's what I do. So attendance requirement. When you're doing a traditional online course, you need to make students engage with the course content and make sure they're not just signed up for it. This kind of facilitates those automatic drops. I sent a little email, and there's messaging from folks that in this upcoming term, things are going to be weird. We might want to be a little more lenient with those drop dates, or those attendance requirements and dropping students from the course. Here's this, right? So notice these are all just those things that a student would need to get started. So I'm saying, hey, you need to do a syllabus quiz, which means understand the syllabus, complete the quiz. This assignment here basically represents that you know how to turn something in Blackboard, which you should because there was an online orientation. And this right here, what this represents is the fact that you need to basically have bought your textbooks and gotten into the required software for the course. Notice I require that by the first Wednesday of the course. I remember when I first started doing this, I wondered if that was going to be an unreasonable request because you got loans, hang-ups, all kinds of reasons why people might not be able to get the textbooks immediately. And so I thought this might be a disaster, but I can tell you I've done this every quarter since, and it's not a disaster. You'll be surprised what people can do if you actually ask them to do it. Now, granted, if people have an issue getting access to the software, the textbook by the first Wednesday, I totally understand that. And if you email me about it, then I'm not going to drop someone if they have some kind of a plan in place. But I do ask them to complete these things by the first Wednesday. So notice that all I've talked about so far is the stuff for getting started with a good online course. Quality Matters, which provides guidance on this, that's pretty much, that's the majority of what they do is talking about what your students need to get off to a good start in your course. That's what you should be thinking about right now, and think about the importance of a first impression and just being clear from day one. That is the best thing you can do to help your students. At the point where they lack direction, that's a bad start in a course, and you just don't know how it's going to go from there. So most of your effort should be focusing on just putting those structures in place to help your students be successful. And so this is all just kind of day one stuff. Then down from here, I don't know, we got our syllabus and schedule online. That's not very interesting. I'm not even going to click on faculty info, textbook information. This is links to where you can buy that stuff. Here's those data files that I also was providing in the start here. Here's SAM information. This was also in the start here. I do think it's questionable that I post the same resources in multiple spots. It seems just messy. But I also know that even when I post them in 2 spots, I have students who can't find them. So I don't know. I don't exactly know what to tell you about that. But I choose to put the critical stuff that people seem to have the most trouble finding in a few spots, especially for day one stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's the wrong call. I'm trying to tell you criticisms of my course because I don't pretend that this is perfect or that I have all the answers. Just trying to tell you what I do and why. FAQ. This is something you get from experience. Those things that you might. I think of this as like the questions that you would get in a face-to-face class. Maybe those things that I get to talk about, and maybe things I could talk about here preemptively, save students from scrambling. And then down in here, some of these things are just standard things. I guess I'll click on supplementary resources because that's not a standard one. Here's a link to my YouTube channel with tons of videos. Here's Jing, which is a tool I encourage people to use. Another link to getting Office. Here's my discussion board. Best practices for an online course are certainly to utilize a discussion board. It's a good way to help students get engaged and to build a sense of community. That said, I don't do much with a discussion board because I struggle to come up with what I feel like are meaningful things. Certainly, that is a valid criticism of my course, and it's something that I struggle with. But if you can find a way to use a message board, it does help to create a sense of community in your course and engagement. So I don't claim to be an expert on that. I'm kind of an expert on a lot of things, but that is not one of them. But that is a thing that you should probably consider if you're trying to do your instruction remotely. Get those people interacting, and right. I mean, even though we don't meet face to face, building some sense of community. Now, this is all just day one stuff, really, is what I would say for my students. I mean, there's a ton of information here. If I were you, I wouldn't try and recreate this. I mean, even if you had all the time in the world, I would encourage you to make your own decisions. But once students get going, my point is I put all these resources into getting students off to a good start. Once you figure out what you need to be successful in the course, you only need to click on one link ever. It's weekly assignments. So I split things up 1 week at a time, and I release them 1 week at a time. So when students first come in here, all they see is week 1. And down here at the very bottom, here's those data files again, which I have now linked to 3 times. Yeah, you could probably guess why I linked to them in 3 different places. Even with them in 3 different places, students say they can't find them. If you can't tell, that kind of is frustrating to me, because where did you look exactly? They're kind of everywhere. But if you see, that's that criticism where I kind of put things in too many places, but I'd rather do that than explain where to find them 5 times. All right, so let me show you what a week looks like. And I wouldn't be too worried about it, because here's where the judgment kicks in. Some people put these together by content area, like Unit 1, Module 1. I just do it like this. I'm not saying it's right. And this is where things get cluttered. But I also just don't know a better way to do it. So here's week 1. Week 1's weird. So here's a weekly overview. If you notice that weird little icon, that means it's a learning module. Definitely overkill. I'll show you what it is, though. You go in here and I say, hey, we're doing Chapter 1. Here's the outcomes or learning objectives for Chapter 1. Here's the reading. Here's the YouTube videos I want you to watch. Here's the practice workbooks I want you to do that are not submitted for credit, but they're going to help. Here's that attendance requirement again, and here are the actual content-related assignments. Week 1's weird because it has attendance requirements. Normally, there's just weekly assignments, but I try and split those into 2 different categories because they have different due dates, and because if you don't complete these, it means you're going to get dropped from the course. Busy, right? Could this just be one thing? It certainly could be. When I started off this video with those announcements, the announcement was basically all this stuff just in one thing, without all the details like that. Overkill? Probably. To be honest with you, I do not think people read the weekly overview very often. I think they read the announcement. That is the impression I get, and that makes sense to me. Why do I do both of those things? Well, it's probably a waste of my time. What's interesting is there are people that somehow they don't see the announcement or the weekly overview, like consistently. And I wonder, exactly what's going on there, but I also know that I can't preempt every problem. If students aren't going to read their email, at some point I can't do much about it. I even tried to put it in multiple places. So these 3 things here are attendance requirement things. See those, right? We've seen several references to them. They are in the week 1 folder. I don't even recommend that people structure their assignments like this. This is just how I did it. Then you go down here. These are practices. And then everything below that is a bunch of YouTube videos. So I try and lump together the things like in descending order. Descending order. So things for credit, things you should do, not for credit, and then just learning resources. That's how I try and put it together. Now where things get complicated in this course, and you could just look at this as a criticism of how you don't want to do things and why not. So this is just like class stuff, very generalized. The stuff that's exactly tied to Chapter 1 is in here. So 2 separate folders for things that are due. That's an example of a difficult organization. But that's how I do it. I think it's helpful to look at a different week, a more normal week. So a normal week is like week 2, where there's no attendance requirement. You notice there's no assignments out here. There's just assignments in here. This is Chapter 2. This is Chapter 3. And then out here I've got a lab. In the weekly overview, I specify that you need to submit the assignments and the lab. A lab is interesting because I give you a solution video. So for things that I think are critically important in the class, I make a solution video, and that is a YouTube video of me just completing the exercise. Sure, they could just go straight to the solution video and complete the lab that way, but there's not a lot I can do to stop that. When I'm putting together an online course, there's a lot of ways you can approach it. I just accept that people can cheat if they want to, if you want to call that cheating. Like if you want to get nothing out of this and watch a solution video, I feel like you're going to pay the tax when it comes time to take an exam. And my exams have big weights on them. And that's because I try and make it as reasonable. Right? I try and give you all the resources I can. And if you want to find a way to not actually put any thought into it, you probably could, but, that'll come back to bite you at some point. And here's practice workbooks. And don't worry about those things. The things below that were hidden. All right, sorry, that's my ring. It's super loud when I smack it on things. So that's what my class looks like. I'm sorry this was so long. I just know some of you are probably going to be scrambling to put together some resources, so I'm trying to talk about what works and what doesn't. If you'd like access to this course, you can have it. Now, I know you're probably not teaching a 131, but we all use Cengage, and I have some pretty good Cengage resources. Like you saw those in the start here. So I'd say my big takeaway is structure things how you want. Announcements are an excellent tool for communicating with an online class. A start here is really helpful because students, you got to understand every online class is different and they're all kind of weird in their own way. So think about those essential things that your students need to just feel settled and get started with doing work in the class. If you can put those together in an easy to digest format and make them look at it, then that would be great. Discussion boards are a good idea, even though I'm not an expert on it. Attendance requirements, these are ways that you have critical points that you can make sure that students are engaging with the class. Because that is one of the unique challenges with an online class is if face-to-face, you know whether they're showing up or not, but if with an online student, you don't actually know if they're doing anything. So building in a checkpoint early on to make them do something with the course is a good idea. All right, so that's probably about all I can do with this. So if you got other questions, let me know. Hopefully this was some kind of helpful to somebody.